We are recording and we are live on Las Vegas Triathlon Club page, Facebook page. Ted, Friday night.
It is Friday night. It's going okay. It's going okay. Making it through January here. It's a kind of a crummy week in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so this is our worst weather right now, and unfortunately, we only get like 2 weeks of it. So
yeah. So we talked about it last week. I decided that this would be a good week to de-train a little bit.
yeah,
So I've been de-training, which honestly, it's weird. It's we've all done it where we really cut back for a week and you expect all these miraculous things to happen. Like, oh, I'm going to feel so great. I don't feel any better.
No, and it's always funny, when you taper before a race, that's where the injuries start to,
you start to feel everything. It's weird. Like you're not numb. You're not numb to everything. And then it was actually another funny thing happened this week. We started swimming back at our old pool at Pavilion Center, and they finally got it all fixed after like 4 months. We've been swimming outside.
Oh.
So, but it was good because we started swimming inside again, and it was this week when it was super cold.
Yeah.
But there was something with our chemicals, and I got a chemical burn on my face.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh man, that's really, it's really strange.
What chemical do they use to?
I don't know, but obviously it's different than what we've been swimming in. Yeah. I got pretty sensitive skin on my face, but so I've been pretty red and doing different creams and stuff like that. I actually even got an appointment with a dermatologist to kind of have an opinion of what I can do in the future. But it's interesting, like just one pool difference can make a difference. So
yeah, the chemicals that the different pools use, you got to have a good CPO, certified pool operator. Making sure that the levels are right, the temperature is right, because it is sensitive.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a good week. I did a Zwift race on Tuesday, got killed.
Oh.
So the league I'm in now is even harder than it was before, and there was 3 climbs that were about a minute and a half each, and I put over 400 watts each time.
Wow.
And got dropped.
Oh boy.
There's 88 people in the race, and I finished the 3rd climb, and I was like in like 57th place. Oh. And then after that, there was a 20-minute climb that I averaged almost 300 watts for 20 minutes.
Wow, that's great.
It was good numbers, but I end up finishing 47th.
Sorry.
And I'm just like, dang, this is like legit. So, there was some former pro continental racers and even one former world tour racer in our race.
Wow.
And but it's kind of good, right, to really push yourself to the ultimate. And but I was like, oh man, I'm on an off week. This is gonna be perfect. I'm rested going into my Zwift race. Still got dropped.
Oh boy. Well, that sounds intense. So I bet you after you get off your bike, you've got to do some recovery.
Yes. So it's interesting you said that because what I did is I went to the pool and burned my face. Because our Zwift race ended at like 6 and my pool starts at 7. So maybe that was my pores were all opened up because I'd maxed it out for an hour.
Yeah.
And that actually, now that you think about it, what I should have done is I should have got on my foam roller.
Oh, there you go.
And done some recovery work first. But I did use the foam roller before the race, and there is some good evidence about using foam rollers before the race. So that being said, John, do you use a foam roller?
I'll use one every now and then. I will have a tight IT every now and then, and I'll jump on one. I don't do it regularly though. So I'm a reactive.
So you don't do it like before you were to go for a run? No, as part of like a warm up?
No, I just have my coffee.
You pour it on your legs?
Yeah, that may actually help. Those days it's a little bit hard.
Yeah, I just take some coffee grounds and I rub them in my legs, and it's good. Yeah. So tonight I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about foam rolling and to talk about we want to talk about the evidence. And the truth is, with foam rolling, a lot of the evidence is anecdotal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of theories. There is evidence, and there, if you get into the literature, you go into PubMed, there's a couple of hundred articles
Yeah.
on PubMed. We've both had grad students that have done some research with foam rolling, and I'm a big proponent of foam rolling in the right context and using it at the right times.
Mm-hmm.
I actually first really got excited about foam rolling, and I don't know, it was like 5 or 6 years ago. I was at a conference, and I always tell a story to my students because I think it's pretty cool. And do you know the massaging rabbit story?
No.
Okay. So this was during the Obama years, and people are all upset that there's NIH funding going to massage rabbits.
Mm.
Like people get upset when they see things. Well, the person that was doing this research was actually an athletic trainer out of the University of Kentucky, and they actually created this mini foam roller or mini roller that they were using different rolling pressures on rabbits.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would elicit a cramp on a rabbit with electrical stimulation, and they would use this tiny little roller on the rabbit, or they would exercise the rabbit, and then they would do the foam roller, and they would actually take muscle samples, and they could tell well, this was the protein synthesis, this was the satellite cell proliferation, or and what we're talking about is ultimately what happens with foam rolling, or with massage is actually what they were really looking at in the beginning. And so I remember leaving that conference and saying, man, that was the best talk I'd ever been to.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what they were coming up with was like, if you exercise and you're a rabbit,
Yeah, right.
and you rolled afterwards, you increased muscle protein synthesis and actually muscle regeneration.
Mm.
And so then, oh man, I'm doing this after every time I exercise. I'm gonna foam roll. And I soon realized that I, number one, didn't have the discipline to do it every time, because you finish a 4-hour bike ride and you want to the last thing you want to do is like get on a foam roller. But I also realized I wasn't a rabbit, so that was part of it. But it that study led to a lot of other studies that kind of started pointed in the same direction. And so I started to be really intrigued by that, and I've been a believer and user of different foam rolling techniques for basically since then. And
That's great. No, and I've like I said, I've used it off and on. I had a student do his thesis on the use of foam rolling back in 2009. So
wow.
he's since gone on for his PT degree. So it's sort of neat to see that moving forward. So yeah, it's a super interesting topic. And I would maybe a little controversial right now, because you do hear anecdotally people are saying don't use the foam, walk away from the foam roller. But I wonder if that is more due to the triathlete mindset of just keep injuring yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's some of it. I think that we live in this world in multi-sport and in triathlon and just in general that it's no pain, no gain.
Yeah, that's right.
And one of the things that we're seeing in the evidence is that it doesn't actually have to hurt. You don't have to find the the hardest foam roller possible and beat yourself up. Because if you do, you can do damage, and you can actually cause pain and potentially delay healing, or
Mm-hmm.
delay, but if you find what the evidence actually kind of shows is that a softer one works as well. Right.
So that raises a good point, because there are all, even back in 2009 when we did this, we had to select from a potpourri of foam rollers and really just settle in on one type.
Yeah.
So I know that you're very not only well read in this area, but you've got a lot of practical knowledge on different types of foam rollers. Can
I
you
got a
give?
whole bunch.
All right.
Let me start out with my favorite, and it's not actually a foam roller. It's actually a rolling pin.
Oh, look
Picked
at
this
that.
baby up at a church sale in Boulder City, the day of Pumpkin Man, I think it was, for
Wow.
25 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an old, get an old rolling pin if you want one. And I just use it nice and light. I like it on my quads and on my calves, but I don't push it too hard, but it's really nice. And it was 25 cents.
Nice.
That's my absolute favorite.
I needed that when I laid my floor down on my trailer.
I should have lended to you. You could have just had us all come over and foam rolled. This is probably my second favorite. This is a Viper Ice
Yep.
vibrating foam roller.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is there's not really a lot of evidence to support that it's better than a regular foam roller. I like, anecdotally, I like the feeling of it more.
And that one, that has vibration.
Yeah, 3 speeds of different vibration, or 3 different frequencies of vibration. Yeah.
And vibration has been around for some time. I mean, we think of the old classic, you know, wrap, you put it on your waist and it vibrates.
Yep.
You know, but that vibration idea has been around for some time, and it is interesting combining foam rolling and vibration.
Well, there's a ton of research on relatively middle, I guess we call it middle frequency vibration and pain.
Yeah.
So I don't know, there's a company, I can't remember the name of it, but they sell a vibration device that you put on a kid's arm before they get a shot. And that is just enough that it'll actually, when you put the shot in, they don't feel it.
Yeah.
So there's an analgesic effect to vibration.
Right.
And so if, for example, you're having like a muscle hypertonicity or muscle spasm,
Mm-hmm.
that is, there's something called within that, there's a pain spasm cycle. You get the spasm because of the pain, you get the pain because of the spasm. And if you could use something to help maybe decrease the pain, there is some theory there.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. And there are vibrations that are considered good, like what you're talking about, and there's vibrations that are considered bad.
Yeah.
And we've done actually quite a bit of work on vibrations in our lab. And most recently, one of the doc students was looking at the influence of compression gear and how much muscles vibrate or don't vibrate. And that was actually hard to measure, but it is interesting. There is some theory around using vibration on a foam roller, but there are vibrations that can be negative too. And
so speaking of vibrations, I've got 2 balls here.
okay.
These are Hyper Ice as well. So this is a vibrating foam roller ball.
Nice.
This is also a Viper. This is a Viper Mini, which is also a vibrating ball. So
I should have brought up my lacrosse ball. That's what I.
Oh, I got one of those too.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So I got
that's analogous to a rolling pin.
Lacrosse ball, another like Nike ball, hard ball. Then I've got just your typical Thera, whatever, I can't remember the company.
Yep.
Foam roller. And then this is a soft pink one. It's actually, this is one where I'm really sore. It's quite soft.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then I have one more that is the standard white one. So I've got an arsenal of foam rollers. And it's funny, I kind of rotate through different, depends on how I feel and what I'm kind of looking for. But a lot of it, once again, is anecdotal. So John, I thought it would be nice if we maybe talk about what foam rolling does do as far as mechanistically and what it doesn't do, and maybe kind of dispel some myths.
Okay.
So I'd like to share my screen, and we will, there we go. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So this was the first one I want to talk about. So as far as what foam rolling doesn't do, as far as mechanistically, and these were some of the earlier theories, and people, on the internet, you'll read, oh, this is what it does. the first thing to understand is that this doesn't alter the fascia. And then for those of you that don't know what the fascia is, the fascia is the coatings or the coverings of muscle. Okay, and there's like an interface between muscle and fascia, and you know, and forever we thought, you know, not forever. Early on with foam rolling, people were very much saying, well, you know what it does is it breaks up the fascia. It doesn't. The strength of the fascia is, yeah, it's basically it's not possible. The thought also, could it change the properties of the movement that happens between muscle and fascia? Not really. The fascia is glued down pretty dang hard, and by just putting pressure on it, you know, mechanistically, when we look at these articles, and it's not possible. Not that it's not possible, it's just not been proven. Same with breaking up myofascial adhesions and scar tissue. Foam rolling over a scar is not going to, foam rollers don't work like that either. Basically, you know, this would need thousands of pounds of force. I saw this, well, this is kind of morbid, but they actually took an IT band out of a cadaver and put on a strain gauge and determine, you know, to see how much it would take to basically start to move it. And it was thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just, you know, that's fascia. And, you know, so, you know, it kind of goes back to that theory. And I think we talked about before about like trying to stretch your IT band. You really can't, and you really can't like, you know, alter alter the anatomy with this. Then the other one was eliminating or relieving myofascial trigger points. This one's also been somewhat disproven. Now, and I don't know mechanistically, you know, why that was even really brought up to begin with. I think maybe it was more like an active release technique.
Yeah, right.
But with a foam roller, we probably can't get enough pressure to actually to have that mechanistically. So there's a lot of, you know, things here, but that doesn't mean they don't work. Okay, because there are lots of mechanisms that we do have good evidence to also support.
So let me jump in on this. Is a great slide because lots of good information here, and it's very current information too. So this is great. But you know, a lot of times you hear people say they use a foam roller to work the knots out. Where does that fit?
So that's a 2018 study.
Yeah.
And basically they showed that it didn't actually do that.
Right.
You know, I honestly, I read a bunch of stuff recently on this, and I can't remember the exact one, but yeah, it's and I've done it many times just anecdotally. Like, you know, you have a big, you know, I have some pretty bad trigger points in my quadriceps, and I've tried like laying on that and, you know, rolling, and it doesn't do anything. Right. You know, it really doesn't.
It hurts.
It hurts. But if I do more classic, like an ART, you know, release, I can get it sometimes in active release therapy. And you can use a foam roller to help facilitate that.
Yeah.
So the foam roller is the tool, but actually just rolling back and forth. And that's what we're talking about here. The mechanism just rolling bathink and forth. Doesn't seem to have that much effect on that.
Okay, good. That's great.
Yeah. So and I think this slide, actually, I should have had just a picture of fascia here with it, but I think understanding, maybe I should just stop for just a second and talk about the anatomy of the fascia. So we have our muscle. So let's think of a muscle. Let's think of like rectus femoris, which is, you know, big muscle part of your quadriceps. So, you know, let's say it's a 2-inch cylinder. Okay. So around that 2-inch cylinder, there's an encasing. You can maybe think of this like if you've seen a steak and you've got that like white area around the steak. Okay. So that's fascia. But within that muscle as well, there's groupings of muscles, of muscle fibers. And so let's say there is, I don't know, a couple hundred groupings of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So within each one of those groupings, there will be another piece of fascia. And that piece of fascia, another piece of fascia, so then you have this group of muscle fibers. So you'll have this fascial layer, and that fascial layer, once again, will basically be adhesed or almost glued to that group. Then within that group, there's another 100 little tiny groups, and they'll have a fascial band. And within that one, there'll be more groups, that'll have a fascial band. And then it'll go all the way down to the individual muscle fiber. And that individual muscle fiber will also have a fascial layer on it. So this is layers upon layers upon layers. And as you get to the end of the muscle, all of these pieces of fascia conjoin, so they kind of conjoin together to form the tendon of the muscle. Okay, so I think if we kind of understand that a little bit, I think that might ultimately help.
All right, that was actually a great explanation. And while you were doing that, I was quickly Googling for a picture.
Okay, perfect.
So I've got that up now, and you basically explained this picture.
Yeah, it would have been a lot easier to have the picture. I didn't know we were going to go down this road. So yeah, you can see the white pieces.
Yeah.
Yep. This is exactly what I'm talking about.
This is fascia. This layer.
And this is a great picture because it goes all the way down to the individual muscle cell on the far left. That tiny thing, there's a fascial layer on that.
Yep.
Right. So if we think about it, we're breaking up the fascia, or we're mobilizing the fascia, it just, and all of these things are basically adhesed to the things below them. It's not really really, I don't know, practical.
And then here is
the tendon.
Tendon.
Yeah.
And all that fascia, all that connective tissue comes down into here.
Yeah. And that being said, fascia is important, and the gluiness of it, believe it or not, we can actually change the properties of the gluiness of it, or the viscosity of it. And that's actually in the next slide. So one of the things we can do with foam rolling is actually allow the fascia or the stickiness of the fascia to change a little bit. But we're not changing the fascia, we're changing the stickiness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Excellent explanation.
All right, let's go back to that.
So yeah, I stopped your sharing so I could share that other.
Okay, so what it does do. Okay, the first thing we do is, number one, we can actually decrease pain. So this is the first time we're talking about the gait control theory of pain, I think, on our podcast. So I'll give you a really brief 100-foot view of the gait control theory of pain. My students are going to listen to this because I'm going to make them listen to this podcast. They're going to be like, "Oh, Mr. Triathlete, you really butchered that." But because our students learn it all the way down very complexly. But what I'm going to tell you is that we have nerves that run from our periphery. So like, I'll give you an example here of your hand, right? So you have lots of different nerves in your hand. We have some nerves that are for touch, right? Some for temperature, some for vibration, some for kinesthesia or where I am in space. Lots of different information that's going to our central nervous system. Well, one of those things is for pain, right? So what our body does, though, is our body will tend to sense the things that are moving the quickest. Okay. Now, touch moves quicker than pain. Okay. So, and it has to do with the size of the nerve cell and the insulation of the nerve cell. So touch is more insulated, and they're bigger nerves, so information moves faster. So in this case, and so does vibration. But in the gait control theory, what we do is we stimulate touch or overstimulate touch, so then it basically overwhelms the central nervous system, so we feel the touch rather than we feel the pain. And the analogy I always use is have you ever, gotten into a car, gotten out of a car and bumped your head? Well, everyone says yes. And what do you do? What's the first thing you do? You grab your head and you rub it.
Yeah.
So that's a natural gate. We're doing that. Like, we're like, okay, I'm going to override the pain by giving myself lots of touch and lots of sensation. And this is the same way like a TENS unit would work. So that is one thing we can do. So if you think about it, if our hamstring is in pain, by foam rolling over it, we're changing the sensation by basically giving it the sensation of touch and pressure. We can decrease pain. Which in turn, if we decrease pain, can potentially decrease, tonicity of the muscle potentially. Okay. Next one. This one's tricky. Diffuse noxious inhibitory control. So this is a tricky one, but we can also override pain by basically creating more pain. So there's actually some theory. The theory is that by causing an upregulation of pain, we're going to get a release of basically, it's norepinephrine, but it's a neurotransmitter that ultimately just makes us feel better. And it's kind of like if something was really painful on you and you pulled it away, it actually feels better. And this is a little bit of a tricky one. Our body will also react to pain by releasing its own endogenous pain relievers. So it's not a theory we normally use, but if you think about it, when you get that really hard foam roller and you press on it in certain spots and it causes some pain, and then you stop doing it and it feels better. So that's, that's that theory.
That's that pressure point that you roll on, or you use that lacrosse ball for, and
exactly
it hurts. And
and then you take it away and it's like, oh, that's a little bit better. Yeah. Parasympathetic nervous system activation. So our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, I think most people understand it. It's broken down to parasympathetic and sympathetic. Sympathetic is the fight or flight. Parasympathetic is the rest and digest. The rest and digest, once again, causes muscle relaxation. Foam rolling will elicit pressure. Pressure activates the relaxation side. It's actually interesting. Have you heard of these heavy blankets?
Oh yeah, I have one.
You do?
I do.
And does it help you sleep well?
Yeah, I don't know.
So I've heard that this was one of the mechanisms that they purportedly talk about, is there's the pressure actually stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, so it's actually used in animals as well. To calm dogs down, especially. As you put a heavy vest on them, and that does do exactly what you're talking about here. It does help them calm down. So
okay. So there's that, and then so if we get this, the stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system, we can cause once again a relaxation. So the next one, thixotrophy. It's a new word for everybody. So this was what I was talking about changing the viscosity of the fluid, in the fascia, because the fascia does have fluid in it. So this actually does occur as well. And this is actually the mechanism that I think we tend to use mostly when we're warming up with a foam roller. So one of the studies that I was reading showed that basically you could do a dynamic warm up, or you could do foam rolling, and you basically get the same warm up, right? And because they both actually stimulate this. This is such a good little thing to talk about, because we talked about warming up before on our podcast, but this is one of the things that actually happens when we warm up. So I was actually thinking about this just earlier today. I was, jumped on the bike for a little bit, and that first 10 minutes, because I didn't do any warm up before. I literally was sitting on a Zoom call just like this, and I'm like, man, I got to do something. So get on the bike. The first 10 minutes, it's like, oh man, this is just hard.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing smooth about this. Yeah, 15 minutes later, I'm like, oh, this is good. Just knocking it out. And this is the warming up theory,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it is changing the viscosity. So the muscle and the fascia and the tiny movements in between them are basically smoother.
I like that. Now, I guess one interesting thing to think about or talk about is the foam roller would be very specific, whereas a dynamic warm up would be more global.
Yeah, central versus peripheral for sure,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what's more important, central or peripheral?
Well, it depends. Like when I'm running, I know my calves are at greatest risk right now for flaring up. So maybe I need to foam roll my calves more so than doing a dynamic warm up.
Or do both.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, this is how I kind of do my foam rolling. And I was going to talk about this when we're talking about the protocols, but I try and make a mental note of like, when I'm out running, it's almost always running that this is a problem with, although I do foam rolling for swimming too. But if I'm out running and there's always something, oh, the inner right hamstring is a problem today.
Mm-hmm.
The calf, the hip flexor, whatever that is, I try and make a mental note. So the next time I run, before I run, I foam roll that area. Like I put some special attention into that area. And that seems to do well for me. And if so for you, in your case, if you feel like the calves are an issue, why not? And do that, and then go for a little jog, and then do your dynamic warm up, and then continue on. Yeah, I think that'd be
But what you're talking about for foam rolling here is probably good to clarify. This is not foam rolling to the point where you're having pain.
No. So we'll talk about the protocols in a little bit.
Okay. All right.
And I think a lot of people mess up on the protocol.
Yeah.
And I think they do damage because they put too much pressure for too long.
Yep. Okay. Good. All right. Sorry. Keep going then.
Okay. The last one, neuromotor inhibition. So this decreased involuntary muscle activation by inhibiting alpha motor neurons. So an alpha motor neuron is basically a nerve. Once again, now this is coming from the brain, stimulating the muscle. And usually this is going to be, well, in this case, it's involuntary. So once again, we're talking about like that muscle hypertonicity. The muscle itself is in a more tonic state or a more contracted state. And there's evidence that that this can work like this. It's actually interesting. Alpha motor neurons are also really implicated in muscle cramping. So when we talked with Lauren Dickey, we talked about alpha motor neurons, evidence that in that area as well. So this is these are still like, these are things, this is not, it's not all fascia related. Some of it's fascia related. But these are still things that are relevant, and that there is some evidence behind it. And once again, and I think you made a comment of it, this is recent stuff. These are like 2019 studies. Yeah. And then, in the studies I sent you, I think the one was a meta-analysis of 2020.
Yeah.
That kind of put all this together.
Okay.
So as far as effects, so not theories anymore, actual effects that we have evidence behind. Okay, so number one, acute short-term increases in range of motion. So this is an interesting one. So in triathlon, so in running and in biking in particular, there's only a few areas that we probably are short in range of motion. So running itself doesn't take much range of motion, okay? But that being said, if we have limiters in range of motion, and the one that's I see often clinically is limiters in dorsiflexion. So that's pulling your toes up. So you're talking about your calf here. If you were to foam roll your calf before you went out, you potentially could increase that range of motion, which would probably be a benefit to you. Okay. On biking, especially time trial biking, limits in glute range of motion and in hamstring range of motion can absolutely be negative for that. So we know we can do that. We can decrease pain in the short term. That's good. We can reduce muscle stiffness, increase tissue elasticity. These are all good things with evidence to support them. Increase blood flow, decrease pain. But here's the tricky part. In the very end, likely has no impact on athletic performance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this, once again, this is a 2020 study of basically study of studies.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is very little evidence that, for example, if you were going to race a 5K, if you foam rolled before and race your 5K, probably not any difference. What I'm seeing by reading into this is long-term stuff, right? This isn't, oh, I've got this really important set that I need to do. I'm going to foam roll and it's going to be better. No, it's probably not. But if you, for example, if you could increase your range of motion every time you exercised, that potentially could have benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is more of a chronic helper than an acute helper, even though we have some acute changes that can happen as far as performance is concerned. And ultimately, when we talk about multi-sport and we talk about triathlon, oftentimes that's all we care about, right? Is how quickly can I get to the finish line?
Mm-hmm.
But this is not, once again, this is not a short-term thing where we just do it once on the morning of the race. I think it's more of a chronic condition.
I like that. I like that interpretation. And it is a matter of training over a long period of time where you're going to have the impact of performance, and doing foam rolling as a habit on a regular basis may actually help you in the long term.
Yeah. So, I may have mentioned this already. Like I do foam rolling before swimming. I don't do it enough. I should do it more. In particular, like your lats, it's a really nice place to be. Obviously our lats are really important when we swim. I'm pretty good at using it on my rhomboids and my other scapular stabilizers. I think there's a place for it. I'll even use like the lacrosse ball, like on my deltoids. So, it's not just about the lower body. There are things we can do for the upper body. So now that being said, the $1 million question is, how do we do it?
Mm-hmm.
And why it's the $1 million question is there is no consensus on how we do it. And when you look into the literature, oh my gosh, everyone's got their own protocol.
Yeah.
This is the art behind the science here, right? And oftentimes when we talk about evidence-based practice, we're kind of left, to our own devices here.
Mm-hmm.
And when I really looked at it, there is no consensus. So this is expert opinion on this, and this is not my expert opinion. This is opinion of many people kind of put together. So so number one thing we see is, if you're going to roll a muscle, especially to warm up, go for the entire length of the muscle. So a lot of people kind of get stuck and they're like, oh, I'm just going to use one spot. Well, do the entire length until you get to a tender point, and that's actually number 4. Then pause on the tender point. And here's the method of the magic. I can tell you this. And this is becoming more clinically what people are doing. So they'll roll the whole muscle maybe 10 times. Find 1 or 2 spots that are more tender. You get to that spot that's tender. Let's say you're doing your hamstring. Okay. Get that spot that's tender, hold it. And when you hold it, then contract and relax the quadricep muscles, the opposite side. So now what you're doing is you're passively moving the hamstring underneath the foam roller. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And when we do that, we're actually seeing even more benefits. And now, once again, this is clinical and this is anecdotal. not necessarily evidence-based.
Well, and it's hard, you know. I was thinking back to the thesis that the student worked on. The possibilities are endless with protocols. You've
Yep.
got total time, you've got rate of movement, you've got rest time in between different sets, and it's really hard to come to a consensus as a, you know, an area of research. And so you end up having to pick one, and unfortunately, that means it's not always easy to combine data from different studies on something like this.
The one thing I will tell you, and I will say this is clinical as well, is don't allow yourself to beat yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't want to do damage. Like, you know, I've heard some podcasts and read some anecdotal articles about, you know, people taking like 2x4s and jamming them into their calves and just beating the heck out of them. And you know what, you got to treat yourself right to a certain extent too. You know, and there's a time and a place to do active release and to really know what you're doing, and to put high pressure into a hypertonic muscle. But in I've seen too many athletes literally beat themselves up to the point where the next day they're still so sore that they can't do the next day's workout,
Yep.
and they beat themselves up on their foam roller. And you know, and they've ultimately created damage and created, like, basically stimulated an inflammatory process in the area. And you know, I've actually seen people just completely bruise legs off of foam rolling. And that's not, you know, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for that relaxation more than anything. So anyways, yeah, so once again, not a lot of consensus. Once again, if you're doing this for warm up, try and do the entire muscle. We're seeing most of the research between like 30 seconds to 2 minutes per muscle or per muscle group. I've also, you know, in some of the reading, they said, you know, because pressure is not as important as we think, you could do, for example, both hamstrings at the same time, both quadriceps at the same time, both calves at the same time. And so this doesn't have to take a lot of time. This could be a, you know, 5 to 10 minute routine. For me, in the morning when I get up, what I'd really like to do is have a cup of coffee and a foam roll. You know, just, it makes me feel good. And this is even if I'm not, you know, going to exercise. But you know, I spend a lot of time. Foam rolling, and I think I anecdotally think it's a good thing, especially in the stressful life that we live.
Yeah, right. Do you find yourself foam rolling in one area more so than others? And
yeah. Mostly, I spend probably the majority of my time on my calves. Because I too have historically had calf issues. And then second to that, I would say I spend the most amount of time on my vastus lateralis, so like the outside of my thighs. And I actually am a big fan of going just behind the IT band. So it is almost like the back quarter of my thigh. I'm just super like responsive to a foam roller there. Like, it really does help me relax that, you know, that muscle. And for most of us in the triathlon world, that muscle is overactive, because that's the power, that's the power muscle on the bike, out of your quadriceps. So those are kind of my go-tos.
No, that's good. And yeah, when the student did his thesis, you mentioned the time, he actually did do 2 minutes of rolling bilaterally, but 2 1-minute sets, and he had a rest in between. I don't remember what that was, but yeah.
So here is some kind of takeaways and the best evidence. So really the effects on performance they're well understood, like what we can actually get out of it. But really the physiologic mechanism, we're still learning. Like, there's still a lot to learn here. And there's a bunch of references here. Maybe what we could do is I could put these in the chat afterwards on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
If people want to read more. And there's more references. These are the ones with the best evidence basically for. So this is the classic case of confirmation bias.
No, and I love that, because actually the meta-analysis you sent me that had a scale to rate
That's
the
this one, right? The
right.
Skinner.
And I think that's an important thing to tell people about, is that there are qualities of research studies that will rank it higher in terms of clinical meaningfulness.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that scale at all?
Sure. So, this is, we could have a whole podcast on that, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
but basically there is it 5 levels of evidence? So
Yeah, I think so.
the highest level is a meta-analysis, and that is basically a study of the studies. And we utilize search engines and keyword analysis to come up with inclusion studies that can be included into the study of studies. And so, and why this is so powerful, let's say we had 100 studies, and 70 said one thing is better, 30 says the other. This will actually not only put them together, but weight them. And so, for example, if 70 of the studies only had, I don't know, a moderate effect, positive, but 30 of them had a very strong negative effect, the 30 would outweigh the 70.
Right.
And so that's why, whenever I, assign things to my students, I always tell them, hey, make sure you have at least one meta-analysis in your review. And it's actually quite an art to produce research as a meta-analysis. It's difficult to do. Yeah. You could make a living in sports science by just writing meta-analysis. So that's the highest. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, and as they pull in a study, then they rank it based upon
exactly
clinical, basically clinical criteria in terms of, was it double blind?
Yep.
Were conditions randomly assigned?
Yeah, I made mention of just the subjects, or not the subjects, the strength of the study, but exactly. So you're right, like a double blind random controlled study, that that would be
that's the gold standard.
The gold standard. But it's not the gold standard. It's the gold standard for a single study. But a meta-analysis that had 20 of those in it would be the gold standard.
No, right. But that's what I mean, is that like a good meta-analysis is trying to identify those key papers, and the ones that you're listing here are those that meet those high criteria for a strong study in a meta-analysis.
And so the next level is pretty close to this, and it's clinical appraised topic. Is that right? Sound right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yep. So that is not quite as powerful as a meta-analysis, but it's still taking evidence from multiple sources. But there's just not enough strong evidence to basically. There's not enough numbers to put it into a meta-analysis. The next lower is a random. Double-blinded controlled study. That's next is down the list, and then we have a research study that wouldn't be blinded would be next, and below that we would have a case study, so just where we had one person, and the lowest is an expert opinion. And sometimes that's all we have is expert opinion. As we're talking about here, as far as the protocols, no one's really studied the protocols, so this is expert opinion. That's
and there's value in that too.
For sure.
You're almost at the point where I always like to say word on the street information, because it is important to recognize the anecdotes and the expert. Those inputs are helpful in driving research. The trick is doing a research study that you don't let your bias enter your analysis. And that's why the randomized double blind study, that the subject doesn't know what's going on, the researcher doesn't know which is the true intervention that you're looking at, because we all have biases, and we can accidentally let them leak into studies.
I mean, we could have a whole talk on just biases in research and the problems with research, which I think we probably should do at some point. in the triathlon world even, right? Because there are so many biases in the triathlon world. You know, there's biases in you know, for example, in coaching philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked about this the other day, should we do you know, sweet spot training, or should we do polarized training, or should we do this, or should we do this? You know, there and thing, but that's just triathlon training,
Yeah.
right? It's not like, you know, I guess hardcore scientific research.
So along with that, and word on the street, what do you find, what are you hearing coaches doing in terms of prescribing foam rolling as part of their training program, or do they touch it?
I think some do. You know, I'd say more do than not. Especially with here's the tricky thing I see with coaching is time is of the essence for most of the people that are coaching,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do you fit in the foam rolling? How do you fit in the strength and conditioning, swimming, biking, running, right?
It's
Life.
a lot.
It's a lot, you know, and I think that most coaches are having a hard enough time just putting the swim, bike, run together.
Yeah.
And most athletes in triathlon are having a hard time with that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think many athletes are really, really time starved. And so finding that 10 minutes to do this beforehand, and you know, we talked at length about doing dynamic warm up and the 10 minutes to do dynamic warm up, and you know, then the time after maybe to do a little bit of body work and stretching. You know, it's really difficult to put it all together. And so I'd say that, you know, word on the street is coaches are not necessarily doing a good job with this side of things, but I understand why.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a matter of managing their time as well as their athletes' time. Okay, so now let's dive into this a little bit in terms of getting started. If
Yep.
someone is not foam rolling right now,
Okay. Yeah.
how would you advise them to start incorporating foam
Yeah.
rolling?
Yeah. I would say number one, well, the nicest thing is this: in triathlon, stuff's expensive. Foam rollers are cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can go to, I always see them at Marshalls and Ross's, and like $15. You can get
Okay.
yourself a foam roller. So that's the nice thing. They're cheap to begin with. I actually would say get the foam roller before, in particular, before you run, try it out. Just try a couple minutes on your calves, a couple minutes on your quads, a couple minutes on your hamstrings, a couple minutes on your glutes, and just see how you feel. If you feel a little bit better on your run, your stride is just a little bit smoother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we all know the difference when you're feeling good running and when you're not feeling good running.
Right.
Then it's, you know, it may be very positive for you. The one other thing, and we actually didn't mention, and I should have put it in this, and this was in the meta-analysis, or was it in the systematic review? I can't remember. What was one of them? That women respond way better to foam rolling.
Interesting.
So for all of the female triathletes out there, I implore you, try foam rolling. I can't remember, it was like 30 or 40% more effective for women.
Well, the thesis that my student did, and I should mention John Garcia, he did just include female subjects, and they had about 3 centimeter, maybe 4 centimeter increase in sit and reach
Yeah,
after foam rolling.
he was smart to choose just females.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
yeah, so I think the barrier to entry is so low, right? I'm not saying go and spend $1,000 on like a Normatec, right? I'm saying $20 and 10 minutes.
mhm.
And
So what flavor foam roller and what stiffness?
oh, I think you start out, especially for sure if you're starting out, start out with a softer one. And
Okay.
once again, there's not much evidence to support that a more dense, harder one is any better.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then start foam rolling Any, just the legs at this point, or?
I think I'd start with the legs,
Yeah.
and then if if it feels like it works for you, the next thing I do is before I swam, I would try and get the lats,
Mm.
get in here, get maybe I sometimes do it up against the wall
Mm-hmm.
on my deltoids, and then, oh man, I I love the foam roller on my back.
Oh, I do too. That's
So one of the things and I just wish I was more consistent with it. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not as consistent as I should. The thoracic spine, so the upper back, and you just
yeah.
lean back after a bike ride,
Mm-hmm.
hunch forward for 4 hours, get home. If I do it, I spend 2 minutes. The rest of the day is way better.
Yeah.
So many times, I mean, I hate to admit it to you. There's many times I don't even take my cycling shoes off and I'm in the fridge looking for some food.
Mm.
It's the first thing I'm doing. And the first thing I should do is take my bike shoes off
Oh.
and get on that foam roller. Yeah.
Well, like you said, it's a good tool in your arsenal.
Yeah. And once again, it's just another tool. And I don't use it every day.
Mm-hmm.
But I know when I do use it, I feel better.
Yeah.
And then now that's just anecdotal, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's good. Well, we covered a lot of good information in here, and a really nice presentation. So thanks for doing that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. My pleasure. My students will like watching this video, I'm sure.
That's good. Yeah, my students too. I'm
All
glad
right.
you're out there.
We got going on this weekend. Is the trailer almost done?
Well, define done.
Livable?
Well, right now it's wrapped up in tarps because of the rain.
Okay.
So that sort of put some brakes on some things I was doing, but I've moved inside and have tried to do some work inside. So I'll actually go down after this and do a little painting. I've got one section that I've got that I paint rather than stain. So
Okay.
but it's coming along. How about you? What do you got?
I'm gonna still take it easy this weekend. So
Good.
like I said, I'm gonna a little swim tomorrow, a little run tomorrow, and Sunday bike ride, couple hours, nothing too serious, and then start building it up again next week. I think. Well, if it's still crummy weather, it's supposed to be still crummy weather next week. Maybe I'll take it a little easy again next week.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I will. I'll continue to work on this.
Yes, the swim power.
Yeah, which is the swim force measuring device that we get to mess around with, which I love this, mess around with foam rollers and instruments, and I mean it's fun stuff to do.
It is pretty fun. The other thing I've been working on, and I think we mentioned it, is the WKO5.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, John, it is such interesting software, and but it is, honestly, now I've had it for over a month and it is still, I'm struggling with it. There's just so much. I'm starting to get into like where you can start to program some of your own graphs, and it's interesting stuff.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And for those of you that are interested in the WKO5, it's a very good analytic tool for cycling.
Mm-hmm.
Not so good for running unless you have a running power meter. So,
well, we'll have to try out some running power meters too.
Yeah, I actually just ordered the newest Garmin chest strap, heart rate strap, connects to your watch and actually will do running power.
Okay.
So I did order that. So I was like, oh, well, I've got all this analytics. I gotta go down the road, and
it's a lot of information.
It is a lot of information.
Wow, that's fun. Big data. All right. Well, hey, Ted, have a great weekend.
You too.
Enjoy a little bit of a break.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. You too.
Oh, I got to get you over and put you to work on the trailer.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
All right, have a
great weekend. Be safe.
You too. Bye-bye.